Let's be honest, at the beginning of the 2019-20 season, nobody expected the New York Knicks to be good. At all. Following a disappointing offseason where the Knicks failed to secure Zion Williamson, Kevin Durant, or Kyrie Irving, the Knicks saw themselves sign the likes of Julius Randle, Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson, and Marcus Morris as some sort of consolation, as if they were on a quest to sign every power forward in the league. Aside from this, they also drafted RJ Barrett with the 3rd overall pick in the draft, and of course, with the Knicks being the Knicks, they went 21-45, severely struggling on both ends of the court with a lack of a real point guard on the offensive end, and the lack of any real defensive presence on the other end. So with clear deficiencies at both ends of the court, what should the Knicks be looking to do? Well, looking at their roster, they're filled with numerous non-guaranteed contracts and team options to a variety of veteran players such as Elfrid Payton, Reggie Bullock, Taj Gibson, and Bobby Portis. With these options, the Knicks could potentially open up anywhere between $42 to $48 million in cap space. I'd like to see them get rid of Elfrid Payton and Taj Gibson, given that both guys either struggled with injury, underperformed, or a combination of both. By getting rid of Gibson, they'd finally open up that center position and unleash Mitchell Robinson, who is by far their best defensive player and potentially their best young talent between him and RJ. Bobby Portis' situation is a tricky one given that he's got a team option worth $15 million. Do the Knicks want to cut him and guarantee some cap space, or do they want to retain him and gamble on him having a good season, which raises his trade value for a mid-season trade for another asset in the draft or another good young player? I would honestly go with the latter because I see the Knicks having a much clearer rotation in the front court by the end of the offseason, and Portis would get a lot more minutes with this new roster. And aside from Payton and Gibson, the Knicks should definitely look to move Dennis Smith Jr., who is clearly unhappy in New York and is coming off the worst season of his young career dealing with injuries and personal problems. Kevin Knox could also be on the trading block as well, given how bad he's been so far in his career. With the backcourt clear of Payton and Dennis Smith Jr., Ntilikina should have a more carved out and clear role on the team off the bench as the team's backup point guard. And before the free agency period begins, the Knicks find themselves with the 8th and the 27th picks in the draft. And with the 8th pick, the Knicks should be looking to draft either a point guard or some sort of wing player. There are a lot of enticing picks, but my top 2 for the Knicks should definitely be to target Killian Hayes or Devin Vassell. Killian Hayes is a 6'5" combo guard with a great jumper, playmaking ability, and a good amount of athleticism. In drafting him, the Knicks would finally solve their problem at the point guard position, and they can finally relieve Julius Randle of his playmaking duties, something that shouldn't have been a thing in the first place. The Knicks really had to resort to Randle being the primary ball handler at times. That should really tell you what kind of situation New York is in right now. But with Hayes on the team, the Knicks also add another versatile scorer, which should make the game easier for Randle and Barrett, as defenses can't just zero in on the two of them anymore. The other route that the Knicks could go is drafting Devin Vassell, a 6'7" shooting guard with amazing athleticism, a continuously improving jumper and scoring ability, and very high potential on the defensive end. If the Knicks were to add Vassell to the team, they would instantly improve their spacing on the offensive end, and their defense on the perimeter, which is something that they desperately need. In my opinion, if I were to choose between the two, Hayes would be the one I would go with first if available, but if not, Vassell is a very good consolation prize. And with their 27th pick coming from the Clippers, they should pick the position that they didn't grab with their 8th pick, with potential guys being Nico Mannion, Josh Green, or Jameis Ramsey. And moving past the draft, free agency is going to be pretty interesting for the Knicks. While they may have a lot of cap space, I do not see them netting a big free agent such as Anthony Davis, Brandon Ingram, or DeMar DeRozan. Instead, I see them targeting a lot more mid-tier guys on short-term deals in order to round out their roster for a season or two. I'd love to see them target Davis Bertans, one of the best shooters in the league at the combo forward position. Bertans would definitely help solve the Knicks' issue with spacing, as Randle and Robinson will presumably share the floor, and RJ Barrett isn't exactly a sniper from behind the arc. In fact, this team was dead last from the three-point line in terms of makes per game last season, and second to last in terms of percentage. They literally could not buy a bucket from three. Another sharpshooter to target is Joe Harris from the rival Brooklyn Nets. He'd play a similar role as Bertans would for New York off the bench or as the shooting guard next to RJ Barrett. Could Carmelo Anthony make his return to New York one last time as a spark plug off the bench? Who knows? And finally, on the more expensive end, considering his resurgence this season with OKC, could Danilo Gallinari even make a return back to New York, serving as that sharpshooting wing the Knicks desperately need, but with a lot more shot creating ability than the other players I previously mentioned? We'll just have to wait and see. Who knows? Maybe the Knicks pull a Knicks and sign Andre Drummond or Fred VanVleet to a max deal and just forget about Mitchell Robinson. And for my projections for the Knicks next season, listen, they're not going to make the playoffs, we can safely say that, but I do think that they'll have a better record than last year, given that they'll be less loaded in the front court and have a more well-rounded team if everything goes well. And with Tom Thibodeau as the head coach, I definitely see this team making some kind of strides on the defensive end because Thibodeau has a reputation as one of the best defensive coaches in the league, but we'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully we get to see a lot more Barrett and Mitchell Robinson on the offensive and defensive ends, and hopefully they'll be utilized a lot more than they were this season. But with all that being said, remember this is just my opinion, so let me know in the comments below how you think the Knicks will do next season. Do you think they're going to surprise people and somehow make the playoffs, or do you think they'll be even worse than they were this season? Don't forget to hit the like button as well, subscribe with post notifications because we're uploading twice a week. And with all that being said, remember this. It has been about 47 years since the Knicks have won an NBA championship. Let that sink in.